Welcome to Coming Home, Survive and Thrive in Homeschooling. This week I welcome back Calli from the Ark Education New Zealand. It's the first in a two-part series on neurodivergent children, especially as it relates to homeschooling. First, Calli unpacks the umbrella term of neurodivergent and its subcategories. There are similarities, but also important differences between each subcategory. The terminology can be confusing, and it seems someone, or perhaps a committee, has rephrased special needs to additional needs. Once the terminology has been explained, we move into what the experiences of families with neurodivergent children could be. Both those who homeschool from the beginning, but also those who pull their children from school and may have traumatic experiences to navigate, as well as formulating homeschooling needs. Calli has practical action strategies for parents moving forward into a new chapter in their lives. We discuss diagnoses. When is it necessary, and when do you just let it be? Also, we start to explore the relationship between diet and symptoms and how to start to make changes. There is a lot to talk about, so let's get started. Welcome back to Calli. I'm so pleased that you've agreed to come back again and sit down and talk with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Christine. It's been quite a busy time, but I've really enjoyed our last interview, so I'm happy to be back.
Excellent, thank you. Because we decided to put to one side talking about neurodiversity in children. I realised it could be quite a big topic by itself, one that was worthy of giving time to go deeper rather than just a brief brush over.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I thought it would be a really good place to try and make some definitions. I think families who are living with it are very well versed in what it is that they are living with, but many people are not, and some will be curious as to what it all means, and some will be looking for better ways to support. As I mentioned to you, it just seems like it's like right in the beginning it was you were called autistic or Asperger's, and then that got changed. And for people that are on the outside, it can be really confusing. So
Absolutely.
Could you please bring us up to date with what the current good title is?
Absolutely. So neurodivergence is an umbrella term that covers a whole lot of manifestations, if you like, of neurodivergent thinking. Neurodivergence, as a rule, is really a set of manifestations that come from right brain or right hemisphere dominance. And these manifestations are quite a long list, to be honest. We have autism spectrum condition, which used to be autism spectrum disorder. But they changed the disorder to condition because it's not really something that you can cure. You are autistic or you're not. They did away with the label of Asperger's. What it is essentially, and it always has been, is that it's high functioning autism. Also, ADHD is part of it, which is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. That is an umbrella term now for what used to be known as ADD, which was attention deficit disorder, but now they call it ADHD inattentive. Okay, so it's also a spectrum. You've got to remember that all these manifestations are on a spectrum. No one person, well, we know everybody's unique, and no one person has all the same symptoms as the next person. They realize that this is, and when I say they, I guess I mean the special education community and the people who deal with neurodivergent learning and thinking. They've kind of made it more simple, but people get mixed up because we're so used to the other terms. Included under the neurodivergent umbrella is also auditory and vision processing problems. Actually, all sensory disorders are part of the whole neurodivergent umbrella as well. So if you have a child that is responding really badly to tastes or textures or anything like that, it is usually a sensory processing disorder. A really good video to watch would be one that is actually on the Ark Education Always Learning channel, which actually it's on the website and it's also on our YouTube channel as well. And it is called Neurodiversity with Corinne Allen. And Corinne is a neurotherapist and she explains all these different terms and symptoms. The last thing that is under the neurodivergent umbrella are all the disses. So you have dyslexia, which everybody pretty much knows about, where you have trouble. It's actually trouble with phonemic awareness, which makes reading a little bit difficult, especially the way process things as neurodivergent people. And I say we because I'm actually dyslexic. Then you have dysgraphia, which is specifically targeting writing, because some people can read absolutely fine, fluently, but when it comes to writing, everything breaks down. So they can decode, but they can't recode, okay? So, which is a strange anomaly. So that's dysgraphia. Dyscalculia is you have trouble with numbers. So anything to do with maths or numbers, it's really, really difficult. Dyspraxia is gross, cross, and fine motor control issues, which comes with, poor spatial awareness, clumsiness, all those sorts of things that often happen probably with a lot of these syndromes or with a lot of divergence. You often find that people have little bits of dyspraxia all over the place. Like for me, which actually could possibly do with my visual processing disorder, which I have Erlen syndrome. As a child, I was incredibly clumsy. I was in the beginner's tennis class for, I think, 3 years before they asked me to leave. I could not play tennis because I could not hit the ball. So this, you have those issues. Some people include global development delay, but that is not really just a right brain issue. It is basically a whole brain issue. So I tend to leave global development delay out. And also Tourette's often is put under the neurodivergent umbrella, but in fact, Tourette's sometimes accompanies autism and ADHD, but can occur on its own without any of those issues. So I would say that Tourette's is a standalone as well. So you've just got to remember that every child is different, and often children will have a combination of the above. So which is called comorbidity. So you'll get children who are ADHD and autistic, or you will get children who are autistic and dyslexic, or you will get, any combination of the neurodivergent manifestations is absolutely possible and happens often. The term special needs is no longer a term. It's now called additional needs, according to the Ministry of Education in New Zealand, which to me is also problematic, but I guess it takes away that stigma of being special. You know how people go, oh, you're special.
Yeah. Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, it is just needs, that need to be met. All of this really is labeling and jargon, but it is the lingo that one needs to speak, so to speak, when you are trying to find support or funding, if you're very lucky, around this issue.
Before we go into the funding thing, I'd like to talk a little bit about the what seems to outsiders the constant changing of terminology when we all know what it means. It's like when the politically correct started up, quite a few decades ago, and just for jokes they were talking about vertically challenged people rather than saying someone's short.
Yes,
It didn't mean they weren't short. You were just kind of phrasing it in another way that wasn't supposed to cause offense. And then that terminology gets changed, but everybody still knows what it means. So for this kind of situation, I mentioned last time my youngest brother is severely autistic. And
mm,
right back in the beginning, it was just referred to as, well, he was IHC.
yes,
And then it became, because IHC means you're intellectually handicapped.
handicapped, yeah.
I have not heard that term for a long time. I guess the politically correct brigade decided it was offensive. So they moved on to special needs, which
And
immediately
now they've
became,
decided that's offensive as well.
well, I know, and now and we all still know that it means intellectually handicapped, but
Yes.
and now it's additional needs. Well, it's part of the modern PC and I would say woke thing is that you keep trying to smudge the edges.
Redefine.
Yes, yeah,
Yes.
change the definitions. And I'm just not convinced that it's firstly necessary, but secondly, it's actually really confusing.
And perhaps that is the whole intention behind it. Who knows? I agree with you. I agree. That's why I have always said that the label actually it gives people comfort, but to be honest, it is not necessary when you are teaching. What any good educator would be doing is looking at the needs of that child and creating the conditions that meet those needs.
Mm,
Then we wouldn't have this obsession with labeling but at the moment funding and any kind of support is actually ironically contingent on getting a diagnosis.
I see, yes. As people, as social beings, we all depend on the categorization in any sphere, whether it's in the kitchen or the classroom, you still need to have a basic understanding because it creates a sense of order. If we're
Yes,
just pretending, well, everybody's got their own challenges, everybody's got their own needs, you're automatically going to end up with a very difficult situation because even from an individual's need to just understand in their own mind, what am I dealing with here? How should I change the way I speak because this particular child or adult is displaying symptoms of this? There is a good reason for it, I guess, is the point that I'm making, just for everyday living amongst humanity.
yes. Well, yes, to a certain extent. I had a group of 40 neurodivergent children. We didn't teach them according to their diagnoses, or we grouped them by need. We met those needs as much as we could in groups, but also as individuals. And that was a highly, highly successful project. That's why I'm saying that if we could find the needs of each child, yes, group them together by necessity, especially if you've got a large group of children or even adults that you are working with. If they've got similar needs, you're going to group them together for brevity, I guess, and like you said, for order. The fact, though, that so much is contingent on diagnoses has made the whole navigation around support and funding extremely inequitable, to say the least, and almost unreachable for most families.
I'd like to focus now on homeschooling families who have got a child or more that would fall under these categories we've been talking about. And they're going to be in two separate categories. They're going to be families who've homeschooled from start.
Yes.
And then those who have had to leave the system, probably
because of the issues.
Yes. And they're going to have different types of needs. The second group, I think, are going to have like recovery type needs as well as the practical, what you're going to do. Let's start with the family who have chosen to homeschool from start.
Those who are homeschooling and notice that their children learn differently, shall we say, that they've got a different way of processing and learning, they're in a fantastic position, because if those kids are at school, those are the children that usually fall through the gaps and find learning extremely difficult. And with that comes anxiety, and with anxiety comes behavior, and then that's usually when it all turns to a big pile of rubbish. People who have their children at home, who are homeschooling and notice these differences, don't panic is my first word of advice, because you've got to realize that they're children and you have the time and the space to identify their needs and to create the environment that's going to best suit them. And that's going to take, from the parent's perspective, some time to observe. I suggest that you keep a diary for like 6 weeks of all the things that you notice about your child's learning, about their reactions to things, about their diet. Are they eating a variety, or do they have problems with certain foods? Do they have tantrums? Write those down. Be really conscious about what triggers those tantrums. If these resistances, like if they're resistant to when you sit down and do math, note that down, because that could be an indication of dyscalculia. If they can read like anything but they're refusing to write, that could be dyspraxia. So I think the most important thing to do is to become very present with your child, because this is going to be enormously valuable information, not only for you, but if you decide that you need support and you go to an educational psychologist or a neurotherapist or some kind of specialist, having that diary there, all the observations that you have found in your child will be absolutely invaluable, and will probably save you a lot of money too, to be honest, because it's a lot of hours observing in these situations that you end up paying for. Be present, don't panic, and do a diary first of all. Once you've done your 6 weeks of observation, it probably pays to sit down with somebody. I'm quite happy to do a consultation around neurodiversity and setting up a plan for learning. So what I suggest you do is write down all the needs that you have observed in your child in one column. In another column next to those needs, write the things that you can do, that you think that you can handle. And in another column, write the things that you think that you're going to need support in dealing with. That will give you a really good idea around what you need to do next, because obviously you are going to find the support that you need. And you can do that by educating yourself, first of all. There are a whole plethora of YouTube videos and useful websites and things around all these neurodivergent modalities. The Ark Education has a few articles and videos up, and we are always putting more up under our Always Learning section. We've had one discussion series so far with Corrine Allen, and there's a few others coming up. Quite often neurodivergence comes with giftedness, so it's quite difficult to, not quite difficult, it's nigh impossible to get funding for those kids or support well within the ministry or within the ministry confines, so to speak. That is usually when you have to go out and fund your own therapist or tester. You have to fund your own tests and things like that. And that is pretty expensive, to be honest. To get an assessment, it can cost anything between $500 and $1,000.
Is it necessary to get an assessment? I'm just thinking, if a family already knows that their child has a different way of learning and they are capable with perhaps help from folk like yourself, what would be the actual purpose apart from personal curiosity to
Nothing. Honestly, nothing. I'm a little bit reluctant to say to people, oh, you need to go and get your child tested. Because if you can deal with your child's needs with a bit of help from somebody else, I wouldn't worry too much about a diagnosis. The diagnosis comes in when the needs are such that you cannot handle them yourselves, where you are needing respite care, where you are needing specialist input. For somebody who was homeschooling, that would come in the form of a disability allowance through MSD. But you have to be pretty bad, so to speak, for them to fund you. And that is when you probably need a diagnosis as well.
That's actually really helpful advice, because I think as parents, just sometimes you just want to know, yeah, then what? Was there really any point to that? So that's really helpful, Calli, and I hope parents listening to that will now have the wisdom to just realize for their own situation how necessary is that. Can I move across to the family and who are now struggling with a child that's had to come out of the school system because it hasn't gone well for them? And, my heart breaks for these kinds of scenarios. It's just, kids can be cruel anyway, but when there are bigger reasons, we'll say, it's just
definitely exasperates the situation, For most of those kids, actually, interestingly enough, I did a survey and spoke about the survey with Marie Buskey about parents who are homeschooling their children and why they're homeschooling their children. I had an incredible response to the survey, considering that usually you put a survey out and it's like you're lucky if you get 20 participants. But I got over 80 participants, and actually the other day I checked it and they're still filling in the form, which is indicative of what a big issue school as we know it at the moment has become. Out of those people that I had surveyed, I think it was 20% pull their children out of school because they had needs that either weren't being met at school or they were not safe, which is quite an indictment, really. So there are a lot of families in the situation that they've taken their child out of the schooling system because of a neurodivergent problem, whose children have been traumatized. That is not an exaggeration.
Oh, I
They've
believe it.
literally been traumatized, and often the parents have been traumatized too. Just pulling your child out of school, yes, it's a first step, but really it's not going to solve all the problems. You need to calm the whole thing down, so to speak. You have to calm yourself down, you have to calm your child down. And so often, though, those parents are heightened, their sensitivities are really heightened. For at least 6 months, you focus on creating a routine, but make it fun. Don't try and push your child into doing anything that they are resisting doing. Lots of play, because play is actually the work of children. They learn more through playing than they do through instruction. That is actually a fact that has been proven over and again. So you actually have to teach children to re-enter the world, so to speak. Try and find out where the sensitivities are, and I wouldn't be trying to get rid of them, but work together with your child to create a space and an environment that they are happy to be in, that they are comfortable to be in, that you are able to go on and teach them something, because they will not learn when they are heightened and anxious and under pressure. Some families are that traumatized, they need counseling.
Do you have it at a practical level then? Because I imagine there will be families who need this. How would you advise them to find, as quickly as possible, like-minded people for a start, for very basic, mum-child support and socializing? Where do they go to find those networks?
I'm slowly building that aspect on. So if you contact me, I am more than happy to try and find an environment for you wherever you are. There's lots of Facebook groups, and I do suggest that you have a look through the Facebook groups, that you connect with either the admins or somebody on the Facebook group. Tell them your situation, ask them whether there is support in the group, whether they'd be accepting of you. Really do your homework around that. I have actually worked with a couple of families myself around this issue. I've done 5 or 6 sessions with families at a time, usually with the parents, and I've done them online as well. I'll work through their situation as an individual and then suggest some activities and some things that they can do together that will start helping them heal. At the moment, there's few and far between people who can help, really. There are the likes of Corinne Allen, who's a neurotherapist. Then you have your alternative healing modalities too. I've heard some great things about sessions with people who practice body talk or who practice EFT, almost miraculous recovery. And then you also have, who I really advocate for because it's in my experience, it was miraculous for me, is the Davis program facilitators. Ron Davis, he's in his 90s now, I think, but he wrote the book, The Gift of Dyslexia. He's actually autistic and dyslexic himself, and he put together a program that is, horses for courses, obviously, but is pretty miraculous in the way it works. But that again is a lot of money. It's a big outlay. It's in the thousands because they actually work with you and your child. So there are various routes to go. They're not always direct. Does that make sense?
Well, I guess you're going to have to try this, try that to a certain extent. But
Yes.
there are very practical tools for parents to use. And I'm very interested to hear what you've got to say about diet, supplements, natural approaches.
Diet is absolutely essential, especially for ADHD and ASC kids. Honestly, organic, natural, nutrient-dense food, there is no replacement for it. It's really difficult with our autistic children because of their incredibly limited palate, which is usually limited to white carbs and Marmite, in my experience. But I think if you can slowly but surely introduce food, whether it be raw or cooked, but make sure that it is a variety of fruit and veg, particularly green vegetables. And funny enough, red vegetables like beetroot and things, which not a lot of kids like, but they have a lot of vitamin A in them, which is essential for children with ADHD. The less sugar and glucose syrup and all those sorts of things in the diet, the better. Quite a lot of the time, these children who have these sensitivities are usually gluten intolerant, or what we think is gluten intolerant. I'm actually gluten intolerant, but I have found that if I use organic flour, organic products, it doesn't irritate me at all.
You mean
that's
gluten? Sorry, can I just clarify that? Do you mean organic gluten?
Yes, organic wheat flour. It doesn't affect me.
Interesting.
And I had a chat with my naturopath, actually. She said to me that is very, very common, because it's not that we're sensitive to the gluten, but to the glyphosate, which is sprayed onto most wheat crops that aren't organic to bring on maturity. It's about having a go and trying things out. Maybe you could try some organic flour and see if that affects your child or not. And if it doesn't, then you can, that's what you use. So besides diet, there's other things that you can use for emotional regulation. So these breathing techniques, there's lots of programs on the internet now that are really, really good. I really highly recommend Zen Den. It's on YouTube, and they do yoga and breathing and mindfulness in a really fun way. I found that children really love it. Go and have a look, see what suits your kid. If you've got children who are particularly ASC and ADHD kids, they need movement. Don't try and make them sit still for long periods of time.
Look, thank you ever so much, Calli. I can just hear your experience and your people overuse passion, but I can hear it, and I would really like families that don't know you're there to know that you are, and that there are options.
It didn't take too long into the interview with Calli when I could see we were going to have to create a part 2. We didn't want to go over important things lightly, so I'll return to some of what we discussed for deeper explanations, and there are still questions I have for her. You also may have questions about this important topic, and I invite you to contact me. I can make as many episodes as there are questions and discussions to be had. Questions, comments, and your experiences are all welcome to include to encourage homeschooling families with neurodivergent children to not just survive, but thrive in homeschooling. You can find a contact section for me on my website. And please don't forget to subscribe to this channel